everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. How are you all? Guten Morgen, bonjour, 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 bon matin, buenos dias, all of the above. I don't know Japanese. I don't know like good morning in Japanese, or I'd do that too. What is it in Italian? It's got to be close to the French or the Spanish. Cielo. Alrighty. I see everybody is as awake as I am, which is not. No, actually, I'm doing pretty okay today. It's my social media day. Woo! So I need to figure out what I'm putting on Instagram. Maybe even something we've been painting, huh? Maybe I'll take a shot of the bronze golem, just the top of him, just for fun. Alrighty. I forget what I did last time though. I may have put him up last time. I lose track. It's one week, one Instagram. Every week, one Instagram. It's my thing. All right, so let's look at our list. Remember our list? I think Pendrake called it a punch list. So essentially, it's our stuff we have to finish list. Hey, Mist Imp, 26 months like a pro. Awesome. Thank you. Morning, morning. All right, so let's see here. I got the bone claws done. So I'm going to mark off some of these. Bone claws. The handcuff and the leather pouch. Did not do the dagger scabbard or hilt yet. Canteen. We did do the skull, but we didn't do the chain. Scroll case I haven't added color to yet. Neck pouch catch, I've done that. Have not done the eyes on him yet. In true Anne style, we have not done the eyeballs. The gold on the teal cloth are kind of still, the runes on the cloak edge still need to be done. And then finish freehand and touch up cape highlights. Those are our list of things. Yeah, and technically the base, but you know, we'll get there. So I think I'm gonna do the dagger in blue because otherwise I don't have anything blue in that vicinity. When you are doing a model and you already have 3 strong colors assigned to the model, and this actually has 4 strong colors technically, although the orange is an offshoot of the red and the orange was used to highlight the red, the orange reads as a separate color because the red is so dark. So I already have a lot of strong colors on this model. Don't reach for another color. Like everybody wants to, don't do it. You don't need it. What you need to do is take a color you've already used, like this dark blue that we don't have much of on the front of the figure, but we have a lot of on the back, and you need to repeat that. And so we're going to take our dark blue, we're going to do that dagger scabbard and the hilt of it, and probably back here, you could make a case for the scroll case being orange. Like we've done the NMM gold on the scroll case, but there's still room to do a color accent. And you could make that case because the scroll case is surrounded by blue and teal. So here we need the orange accent more because we've got an orange accent back here. We've got the red up there, but we don't have we don't want to use teal because it's right up against this. And we don't want to use blue because it's right up against this. So alternate your colors across the model. So we'll be using then blue and orange, blue, and then scroll case orange. And then we'll have to do a little bit more gold. We're going to have to decide if we want to do a gold band across the bottom of this teal. And I need to take some liner and just touch up these runes. Maybe pop some highlights on those. So yeah, and then a little bit of NMM steel on this chain. Actually, chains are one of the easiest things to highlight for NMM. They're very, very simple because your areas are so very small. The highlights and shadows are very simple. Yeah, once you've got your main colors, it's all about alternating. It's all about figuring out, okay, what don't I have in this area? Because his belt is black. And we do have blue on this scarf here coming up over his shoulder, and I need to highlight those little blue things anyway. But we don't have any blue in this area, and so that is our key to put blue there. So get your list of colors in your head. And in this case, I'm not repeating the skin tone anywhere because really the skin tone is the skin tone. And if it's not skin, I don't want it reading that way. So I don't want to use the skin tone anywhere, even though technically it is a color on the figure. But I do have orange, teal, and blue here, and I can reuse those. You can also use gold and steel and black, you know, and bone. So, which we've done, right? We've repeated our bone color on his horns and on his little necklace there. You know, the little skull there is gold. This skull is gold. So you've got this list of colors, and really don't go outside of it. Like you don't need to feel like you need to reach for anything else. Like there's no reason, no good reason to reach for a totally different color for some incidental detail that doesn't matter. In fact, it's distracting if you do. Oheyo gozaimasu. I don't even know how to pronounce that, Koriniko. So I guess I'm going to just pass on that unless I have a Japanese person actually tell me how to say it, rather than slaughtering it. Because I don't even know where the accent should go there. This dude is the last in supposed to, yeah. That's true, because I liked how he was turning out, so. All right. We were using Void Blue, so I'm going to grab it. And we're going to add some white to it to bring up highlights. I'm going to actually re-highlight the little blue scarf here just to bring out the color. But yeah, when you have a busy model, it is key to use, one, a lot of neutrals. So I'm using black and bone here a lot. And to just alternate your existing color scheme. Like in this case, our main color scheme is actually blue and teal. And which is hard to make work, but we did because the blue is very dark and the teal is very is light, and I pushed it toward yellow, which pushes it away from the blue. So blue and teal is our main color scheme. Orange is only an accent color on this figure. Technically, our color scheme is a lot more like red, teal, blue than it is. The orange is only used for small details until you get to the back, and then the orange is kind of mixed with the red, part of the red up there, to create this. But we can get away with that because orange and blue are complementary. So at this point, since the cape has a very different color scheme than the rest of the figure, because this is such a two-sided figure, and that gets us into talking about viewing angles. So every model has at least two primary viewing angles, is what I call them. And this is what I kind of use when I'm figuring out how an MM needs to look, because you really only need to pay attention to that sort of thing on the primary viewing angles. People are generally going to look at this guy from the front and the back. They're not going to sit here and critique your NMM on the side. So as long as there's nothing garishly off about it, you're going to get away with that. Same with looking at it from this direction. I did actually spend some time here because there are interesting details, so I made sure that this NMM would read. But other than that, this is like a weird viewing angle. Like somebody might do it though, and the reason that this may become a viewing angle is that it's face on. So anybody who wants to look straight on at his face is actually going to be looking at this part of the figure. So you have to like probably call this a secondary viewing angle, because most people are going to do this and they're going to do this. And then a few people might turn it to look at his face, at which point this will become a secondary viewing angle. But Ohio gozaimasu. Ohio. Wow, it's hard. Ohio. So it's like Ohio. Gozaimasu. Yeah, wow. That's like counterintuitive for me. But I always, actually, words with accent on the first syllable actually are, and I have to like kind of parse that out into two words almost. That's hard. That's hard, yeah. I thought about taking Japanese in college just because I was intrigued by it, but it's a 6-credit course as opposed to 3 credits for like, you know, French. So I ended up like not. No room in my schedule. One of my minor ambitions that never got realized, but that's okay. I've hit most of the major ones at this point. All right, so we're using Void Blue, which Void Blue is not a super high coverage color, so I'm going to use it almost straight. I'm just going to use it 4:1. I want to touch up some of my blue areas, base coat, and then I want to get into some highlights with it. Hello, Bob and Julie. How are you? All right, and then I'm going to pop a little bit of this Void Blue over, but I'm probably going to need to actually use more drops of it because Void Blue is pretty transparent. makes it a great shading color, by the way. When you need those cool shadows, you need a blue to glaze over another color for those cool shadows. This is a great color, but it is a little bit transparent. And because of that, when I add white to it, it's going to go really light, really fast. So I'm going to have to add a little bit extra blue to make sure it doesn't go too pale. Boop. There. And this is going to make it go really, really pale. And when you see this, it doesn't mean that there is a lack of blue pigment or anything in the Void Blue. It's exactly the opposite. There's a ton of blue pigment in Void Blue. It's just that blue pigment is naturally transparent. And so when you throw white into that, you see a huge shift no matter what you do. So don't consider it a downside. It's just is how it works with the pigment. A lot of people get these ideas in their head about what various stuff means as far as like how much pigment is in a paint. And in reality, they're often incorrect. It's simply that some pigments are much stronger than others. Some pigments, if you're adding opacity, are going to shift the color or appear to shift the color a lot more because you went from a transparent to an opaque. That definitely impacts the color. So don't always believe the judgments that people make about, like, another great one that people, and I actually tackled this in one of my Patreon things about it's Mythbusters. It's the Mythbusters series that I did a long time ago. But one of the big ones is, oh, that paint doesn't cover, it must not have very much pigment in it. And that's so wrong. Some of the least covering colors in MSP are some of the highest pigmented. Clear magenta comes to mind. That thing has a ton of pigment in it, but it's still never going to cover. And the reason is that Queen of Magenta doesn't cover. You could just grab the pigment and mix it half and half with like paint, and it would just be like, it still wouldn't cover. It would look maybe like it did until you like actually brushed it over something, and then you'd be like, oh. But it's just a pigment characteristic. Hobby painters tend not to understand this in North America because we're so used to companies changing the colors and adding coverage, either through the use of bases or through the use of additional, like adding high coverage pigments. It shifts the color slightly, but it gives the better coverage that gamers really want for their figures and have wanted for, decades at this point. So see how I'm highlighting that little, and makes, even those few little highlights there make the little fringe on the shawl really show up a lot better. Brings out my blue. It makes the blue a player. When the blue is very dark, it's really not a player here on the front. So you have to lighten it up just a little bit. And now it resonates with that blue down there. And I need to bring that blue over here. When I add white, it's white. Pure white. Unless I say off-white, I went splat. In this case with blues, it's almost definitely, if I want a vibrant blue, it has to be pure white. If you want a pretty, like, bright light color, it must be pure white. There is no other answer. Whenever you add an off-white, any off-white, it's going to make this color change and get less bright. It's going to make it muddier because you're adding other pigments. So I will almost never tell you to add an off-white, at least in clothing colors, depending. But with a bright color scheme like this, I won't ever tell you to add an off-white. Where you will see me use an off-white is with animals, like the hair folk that we're painting. I specifically use bleached linen on her because that is going to give me a more natural highlight, because most animals don't have pure white on them. It's a dirty white or an off-white, a cream, usually. And so you won't necessarily see a pure white on an animal unless it's a highlight on white fur. And then it's not actually the color of the fur, it's just the light bouncing off of the animal. So in general, on bright colors for clothes and for like metallics and stuff like that, or sorry, non-metallic metals, it's always pure white, always. Does that make sense? Because the off-whites can be useful, but they are like, they're specialty colors, meaning you can use them. It will change. Like, okay, so most people use the off-whites wrong. Not wrong, but they don't think about it. All right, so an off-white, a lot of usage for, say, bleached linen or linen white. Those colors are really meant to highlight skin tones or animal fur tones, like organic colors like that, leather, because they're a yellowy, right? So that kind of mimics like the action of like sunlight on like a golden color or a brown color or, a skin tone, paler skin tone color, stuff like that. So like when you want to have a more natural highlight that's maybe a little less harsh, and if you add linen white to something like a blue, it's going to soften it. It's not going to be as bright. So it's going to mute it very slightly. But you can do it. It's just going to affect your colors because you're adding not just white into there. You're adding in that other pigment. So linen white on a blue is going to shift it slightly greener. Does that make sense? Like always think about why you're using an off-white instead of pure white. If there's no good reason, you probably just want to use pure white. The other reason I will sometimes use an off-white like linen or bleached linen, although very seldom, you'll have noticed on the stream if you watch it all, is if I don't want that huge load of white pigment that pure white brings. But it's very rare because, as I said, I'm sacrificing purity of color, like purity of hue, by adding in and muddying it with other pigments. So be specific about why you use your off-whites. Another example, a good example also would be like, okay, so ghost white, which is a blue white, right? So one good use for ghost white is doing very small eyeballs, the whites of very small eyeballs, because if you have like a brown or tan or pale, peachy, rosy, human skin tone, the blue in that white will make the whites of those eyes stand out more. So if you have very small eyes, that can sometimes help. More often though, it's if you want kind of a cool cast over your whole figure, because whatever your highlight color is, whatever your highest highlight color is, guys, it's the light color. So if you were to highlight an entire figure with ghost white, your entire figure would seem to be cooler, in cooler light, not in warm sunlight. So, because the blue and your brain, like you may look at it close and not really get it, but your brain may pick up on it, depending on your other color scheme. And if you're trying to mix that ghost white into anything like a skin tone, it's going to gray it out a little bit because it's a complementary color. So you've gotta, this is why how off-whites can be a little bit problematic unless you're using them with intention. I mean, it's not hard to make your own color wheel with MSP. If you are on my Patreon, I actually did a color wheel with like kind of the primaries and the MSP colors that went with them. I did that a while ago, but it's, it's a color wheel. It's got the kind of the halftones. So it has like yellow green and it has like regular green and it has green yellow and it's branches out a bit. Everything else that isn't is just a muted version of one of those hues. And that's why it's just such a huge pain to try to map that out. Like, in order to have a real color system, you almost have to map in 3 dimensions because you need to be able to not just do dark and light, but you need to be able to do muted. And ideally, you also can do warm and cool, which you kind of can hit on a color wheel, but then it's like you need you can't just do it all on one color wheel. It won't make sense to people who don't really get color. Because of that muted factor. They're going to look at, rich leather and they're going to see that it's in orange yellow. But it's an orange yellow with black added. And, it's like, it's not, they're going to say that's not an orange yellow, but it is. So, that kind of counterintuitive thing can be very difficult to convey on something like a color wheel. This is why the color wheel is not perfect. And why I don't use it. Like, I use it for basic color, like figuring out basic primaries on a color scheme. But I don't otherwise use it a lot as far as other color relationships other than the very basic. Oh, look at that. What is that? That's kind of an orangey yellow, isn't it? Yeah, that's rich leather with white in it, guys. Orangey yellow, but muted. Ta-da. So yeah, if I try to do a color wheel and I tell people this is an orange yellow, they're going to be like, be careful with it though, Splat, because the whiter you make the eyes, the more unnatural they look. It usually only works on 28 mils or 25s, things that are very, very small. I had a friend who used to use it on his Space Marines because the eyes on the sculpts were just so little and he wanted them to show up. And that was how I learned that trick. Chris Olhafen, a Golden Demon winner from long ago. Chris, if you're out there, hey. Totally passing on your knowledge, dude. Good morning or afternoon or whatever you are. But yeah, I mean, any off-white has a color to it. It's a white, but you need to, the more important thing when dealing with an off-white is identifying what the other color is. You know it's a white, but how does it go? Does it go yellow? Does it go brown or gray? Like desert sand, you know, and like leather white is definitely a gray with a touch of brown. You know, which way is it going? What color is it actually? It's a very light version of another color. It's not actually a white. Hey there, Lady Kachara. We are color theorying while we are mixing colors for our blue here and bringing out this guy's scarf. Since a lot of what we have to do here is just very small, you know, touch-ups or filling in details, we are filling it by talking about color, which I can do for pretty much hours eternally. But yeah, so an off-white, ignore the white part of that. What color is it actually? I use bleached linen a lot as a highlight for fur, for example. And bleached linen is actually, and it's hard to see sometimes, so what you want to do is you want to put it next to pure white. And there, you definitely see a yellow shift and also a gray shift. So when you put your off-white next to your pure white, you're going to see what color it actually is. So what it is this kind of a grayish yellow, which is essentially a dirty cream, which is the color of an animal's coat, like a paler animal or the white spots, the shadows. You know, it's that dirty color. They aren't pure white and sparkling like a Samoyed dog. You know, in general, like Samoyeds are like the exception, and that's only if they get washed frequently. Like, humans have bred dogs to be pure white, but it's not, in most wild animals, you're not going to see that. So yeah, always ask yourself, what color is this white actually? And do I want that? Like, does it make sense for this? All right, I'm going to start, actually, I've built myself a blue triad here off of Void Blue, and I've done it by adding 1 drop of white to like 5 drops of Void Blue, and then going a little stronger with my white over here by transferring some of this and adding another drop. So now I've got a Void Blue triad, and my midtone is actually not Void Blue, notice, it's this Void Blue plus white, and that is absolutely what I'm going to put on first onto these areas that I want to be blue. Because Void Blue has very little coverage, and it's much easier when you have a paint that is transparent to start by adding a little white to it and then go back in with the darker color and shade it or change it over the top. So you want to start with a bit of this blue instead. My point kind of is that pure white and pure black are very, very difficult colors to find in nature. And so that's why a lot of oil painters don't use either. Unless the reason that painters will use pure white is if they need to depict a strong light source off of a shiny surface. So they're using pure white not to paint an item, but to paint the light. And that's how good miniature painters often use it as well. It can be also highlights on a white animal, but then if you think about it, it's the same thing. You're just using the white to depict the light, because the light is what's causing the white animal to look more pure white. And black is a very dicey color in nature. It's a dicey color in a color scheme unless you can bring it up with more interesting colors, because pure black is just a hole. Like carbon black is just like it exists in like charcoal. like it's a dead black. So that's why you get that black 2.0 and all that crap. Is like it just absorbs light. It doesn't, reflect any color. That's why it's black. So what that does is it essentially says, don't look at this when you paint something black. And to get around that, you need to be clever and highlight with something that has a hint of color so that you bring more interest visually to that black. Or maybe you mix your black. If you're an oil painter, you mix your black out of different colors, and then you utilize that. And because it's the blackest color on the figure, it still looks black, even though it's not. But because it was mixed by putting different colors in it, it's more interesting, and we don't see it as kind of a dead zone when we are looking. So whenever I can, I mix my blacks. I very, very seldom. Like I use pure black on a base. Why do I use the pure black on the rim of the base? Because I don't want anybody to look at the base. Who cares? It's the base. I don't want you to look at the rim there. I just want kind of a nice frame, like a black frame around a picture. That's how I view this this area here below the gravel or sculpted detail, and just at the rim of the base, the flat area there. I just view it as like it's a frame. And I don't want people to look at it. It's there to accent the rest of the figure. So I will always use pure black there. And it's why people, when they mount figures on wooden blocks, they tend to paint the block black. It's a big block, but you don't want anybody really looking at it. The point is the figure. So it's meant really to offset the figure. White is simple to... Technically, the points of it are simple, but it's difficult to execute because it is about contrast usually. You do not want to go very dark with it. Got to keep it lighter. All right, so I'm adding in some void blue to create a shadow on that lower side. You can see how it's kind of darker there. And I'm going to grab my highlight. I very speed painted. I mentioned this, I think, even yesterday, but back in the old Reaper Toolbox videos that I filmed while I was still at Reaper, we speed painted a dire bear, I think, as a polar bear. It was very fast. It was like I'd finished the whole thing in one video, and it still looked pretty cool. But I think I only used white at the very last highlight on that sucker. Otherwise, it was painted with like grays and creams and, off-whites, which tend to be more naturalistic. And I definitely will raise my hand and say, hey, I'm biased in favor of naturalism. I like to reach, if I'm painting animals especially, I like to make them look natural. I think it adds greatly to, especially to humanoid animals, like the hare folk that we're painting, to attempt to give the animal the natural colors and natural patterns that it would have if it wasn't just an animal, and bring that to the anthropomorphic animal. It's very... I feel that that's like the most effective thing you can do, because it brings that naturalness, like it emphasizes the animal side, which otherwise you are not, right? You're bringing in clothing and hairstyling in a very unnatural way. But if you can reach back to the roots of that animal and give them that sense of wildness, that I think is when you have the best synergy. That's my personal opinion. And many people will not agree with me, but it's what I reach for in my own work. Because I love animals so much, and I love like animals and wildlife and nature and wilderness, and I reach for that sort of thing. Here, this is one of the most cartoony models I've done recently, actually, on this stream. Normally, I reach for a much more natural look, but he's a tiefling, so he's like, he's kind of double spawn. So he doesn't need to be natural. He's kind of like the basis of him is unnatural. Plus, he's a warlock, so double unnatural. Doubling down on the unnatural. Oh, thanks, Quindy. Yeah, if you want to watch the polar dire bear, I mean, it's not like the greatest. It was the old setup, so like the camera work I think is a little bit not as good as we do now, but you can see me paint it. Totally speed paint that polar bear, and it still looks like a polar bear. It's actually one of my favorite, I think, videos back in those days because it worked so quickly and so well, and I got exactly the effect I was looking at. So now I'm going to bring up my highlights. You can see how I started. I have a highlight down here, but these highlights are a little bit darker. I'm going to bring up lighter highlights here on the shoulder, and also I'm going to bring the entire blue up a bit. So instead of having the void blue up there as my shadow, I'm actually going to paint in what I used below as my first highlight. I'm going to paint that in as my shadow. So on upper surfaces, your shadows should still be there, but they need to be lighter. You'll still have shadows in between details on areas where the light is striking more strongly, but you won't have dark shadow. So we bring that up. And then we'll pop our highlights higher up there because it's more in the light. But yeah, I feel like painting white animals is less about color and more about contrast. It's how dark do you take your darks? How much of it do you use? I mean, any white animal, the best color to use for the base is going to be something like wolf gray, which is kind of a brownish gray, or like weathered stone 9087. That's going to give you a good start. I'm going to mix one more highlight actually. So notice how as we paint, we naturally progress toward pentads, which I've been doing my $5 PDFs on. Because you want a range of colors, and every time you step up, every time you're painting, as you reach toward the highlighted area, you need to mix lighter colors for your highlights. So I'm going to start with my white now. 3 drops of it, and I'm going to take a big brush full of the previous blue and put it in with my mixing brush. Bloop. If I need just a little bit more, I'll grab just a little bit more. There we go. This is a smaller puddle, so I'm going to add some water to them. And this one I added a lot of pure white to, so I can add a ton of water to this. But yeah, another good color to start with, desert sand. If you want a warm white on your animal, like more of a yellowy white, starting with desert sand is good. Starting with yellowed bone from the ivories triad is good. Going up with creamy ivory to linen white and white. All of those. If you want an unnatural white, if you're looking more at like painting an ice creature, then you want to start with more of a blue-gray, like Snow Shadow. Pentad. Pentad is, you know how triads are, lady? So Reaper was made with triads, but I actually have always felt that it's better with pentads because pentads give you a succession of 5 colors instead of just 3. So here's pentad theory for those who are not on my Patreon and have not been reading my many PDFs about pentads. I also did a video on painting with them. So let's say that we've got, actually I probably want that a little darker then. Then I want to bring in some blue here. So all right, this is a pentad. This is a blue pentad based entirely around void blue. The key with the pentad, oh, okay, yeah. Look up pentads. P-E-N-T-A-D-S. So the key with the pentad is that it's 5 colors instead of 3. And what it does is it gives you 3 triads. So not only do you have a middle triad for painting like your midtone area, but then if you shift to the left, you have a triad for painting your shadows. If you shift to the right, you have a triad for painting your upper areas. Now, you can vary this, and sometimes, like if I want it to stay a very dark blue, then I would have kept probably things a little bit darker along the route. And I probably would have gone down instead of up. So if I really wanted to do a void blue triad, I probably would reach for Nightmare Black here, and I wouldn't go up any higher than this. In fact, I might even add a little more blue to that in order to keep things darker. So you can go add to a triad on either end. You could add to a triad and add another shadow, or you can add to a triad and add more highlights. And by doing so, you can build yourself a 5-color progression instead of a 3-color. That is the basic theory. I have recently done pentad PDFs on reds, oranges, yellows, greens, and blues. I think this month I'm taking a small break to cover the copper and MM triad because I've gotten a lot of requests for it. But then we'll be back in finishing purple. Yeah. So if you're a newer painter, pentad, like triads are good, I always say are good training wheels, right? They give you that shadow, midtone, and highlight that all work together. And then pentads are the next progression on the training wheels, where you expand, right? You get a bigger range of colors, and you've got 3 triads, and you start paying attention to, okay, the dark 3 are going to go in my shadows, and the middle 3 are going to go in kind of my middle areas, and then the top 3 are going to go in my bright areas, my highlight areas, the places where light is falling. So it gives you a bigger range. It gets you more comfortable with using a bigger range of colors. Then once you are more comfortable with color, that's when you start really thinking about the complicated stuff, like I do, where I'm adding cooler colors that are totally different to mix my shadows. Instead of just reaching for a darker version of blue, I'm maybe adding a dark brown and mixing it into my blue and doing it that way. Or maybe I'm doing something, completely different. So there's definitely a progression beyond pentads where you start really taking the training wheels off and you start absolutely changing your shadow colors so that they're different colors and the highlights are different colors, not just progressions along a single line. But I don't expect people to hit that right away. Like, it's unrealistic. Some people really have a good flair for color and they get that, they start messing with it right away. But a lot of people that come to this hobby have no art background. And so they don't have that kind of basic level of understanding about like warmer colors being highlights and cooler colors being shadows and all that sort of stuff. And so I like to try to teach it more intuitively. I like to baby steps you along a little bit. So I'm bringing up a little bit of that pale. When you've got very tiny areas, that's where you have an excuse to pop your highlights more, because it's going to make all that little leather wrap on that dagger show up more. And I can take this highest highlight also and kind of highlight this area just to make it the edge highlight, just to make it stand out a little more. Like so. So now we've brought up that blue. We've brought our blue more into this area, and I'm going to highlight it more up here. Yes, now you know. Yeah, it teaches this theory. It teaches you how to use progressions of 5 colors to learn highlighting and shading. So if you watch that video and then you go to the $5 PDFs, you'll understand what is going on. Yeah, exactly, Shadow Raven. And that's a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people, everybody's creative, okay? Whether you think you are or you aren't, every human has some creative impulse. Like, even the people who think they're not creative really wish they could draw, right? And the thing is that miniature painting is a great hobby for you if you previously have no experience, because it slowly teaches you, like, you can start out getting a good effect with very little experience. And that is encouraging. And then it kind of teaches you as you go. You end up learning so many more art principles than you ever thought you would. Like, I always say, and people like kind of give me the eye, but I always say I learned more from mini painting, more art from mini painting than I learned from art school. And it's true. I learned more technique from this. I learned more about color from this. I learned a ton more about light from this. My art school education just was not nearly as effective as miniature painting. So even if you feel like you're not creative, people are drawn to this hobby because it gives you an easy entry point to learn these things. You don't even realize you're learning them until you're like, oh, I totally get how that works. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm no artist. But you have a basic creative, impulse. And a lot of this stuff can be taught. So much of it can be taught. So it's a great hobby because it encourages anybody to pick up their creativity and work with it and have fun with it and play with it. And you just kind of learn as you go, incidentally. And you can go as far or as near as you want. Like, you don't have to push yourself in this hobby. You can just enjoy it. But you do tend to absorb stuff over time. Principles that they would have taught you if you had gone to art school. Or maybe they wouldn't have, because they didn't manage to get me to teach them to me until I got out of it. So there we go. So you can see how I've brought up the blue on the shoulder there, and then it goes to a more, neutral and then to dark as it falls down toward the waist. Yeah, I learned by doing. No, I don't know. Like, what I found that art school lacked, and then maybe this is just the nature of instruction, because I see the same thing in the mini painting world today. And it's why I strive so much to break down everything into like its lowest components. I think one of the failures of art school is that you don't really get one-on-one instruction. Your teacher is juggling 30 students, and they can't go to you and see that you don't have the understanding of, say, how shadow adds a weight or a volume to figures. And they can't sit there and spend time with you until you click with it, right? But here, now, today, I think that actually that's more, you can get that more because of YouTube, because of Twitch, because of coachings, because of stuff like that. I feel like you can essentially, through YouTube and Twitch, you can get a lot of like essentially one-on-one kind of coaching. You can ask questions. You can keep asking those questions until you get it, until it clicks with you. Patreons that, we go over kind of a lot of the same topics. We go over them again and again, but a little different each time. A little bit of a different figure, a little bit of a different color, a bit of a different technique, a bit of a way to tackle it. And so eventually, if you're devoted and you like watch this stuff and read this stuff, you get your epiphany moment from somebody somewhere. Whereas art school is like, oh, I've got a semester with this teacher. The teacher has to juggle 29 other people other than me. And so if I'm struggling with something, they might come up and say, you need to make your shadows darker. This happened to me in school all the time. You need to make your shadows darker. You're just drawing lines. Well, why? Why do I need to make my shadows darker? Show me how, it will change the work, like keep teaching me. But that's not the nature of our educational system today. It's got to be a one size fits all, get people through it and done. And that's how it does a disservice. And I mean, I could go on forever on that one, but I really feel like that's why these days people are like discovering their creativity and their natural aptitudes, and like they're discovering all this stuff like in their 20s and 30s and 40s and even their 50s. And, because for the first time they have access to all of this focused learning that's taught to them as if they are the only student. Yeah, it's a big problem. Who is it? Ken Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson from Britain. I think he did a TED talk on the nature of the education, so how the education system fails us, all of us. But yeah, so I mean, based on my experience, I would encourage artists and writers and creatives to get out there and do stuff. Like, sure, get a day job, hold a day job. You don't want to be a starving artist. Trust me, nobody wants to be a starving artist. So definitely make sure you can get by, even if it's scraping by. Make sure you've got a cushion, make sure you've got an emergency savings, but then get out there and do it. And you're going to learn a lot more by doing it that way. And, definitely find mentors. Definitely, if coaching is the kind of instruction that works for you, give it a try and see if it does, right? Some people find coaching to be a very high pressure, socially high pressure situation. I do. Even as a teacher, I do sometimes. And that can impede learning. So if you try a one-on-one coaching and you feel really pressured or anxious or just, then it's not probably going to work for you. Then the thing that probably you should reach for then is a Patreon that is structured well, that takes time to explain concepts to newbies, or find a good YouTube channel with an instructor that you really resonate with or like, and learn that way, right? So Yeah, it is. Well, because teachers don't have time. It's not their fault. It's the way that it is now. And I hope that sometimes I feel like for creatives, Like, you get out of college and then the real crap begins. Like, then it's on, right? Because then maybe you find somebody who mentors you, right? Who takes the time to help you and explain to you. This happens in mini painting all the time. When you see somebody painting at a game store and they're better than you, but they take the time to explain stuff and help you, like, that's mentoring. Like, that's how this hobby grows. All right, let's get some orange going on and some steel. I've got that blue going now, and it's really, since I highlighted the fringe here, that's standing out. The blue is resonating pretty well with that. Now, my cloak is still very dark blue, and I have not done a lot. I've done a little bit. You can see the highlights on it, but I'm keeping the cloak a darker blue, so I haven't brought it up as much. I may change my mind on that, or I may keep it this way. Either way, though, at least I've got the blue there so that it now... there's something to hold this together and bring that color around the model. Now, blue is a cool color, and so it isn't going to attract the eye nearly as much as the orange, which is why the orange is our accent color. Technically, you could argue that the gold is also an accent. Yes, they try to beat your style out of you, and then, yeah. And part of the reason they do that, Fairy, is they want to give you the technique, right? So some people might even think, like, if they took lessons from me or they took a class from me, like, say you're starting out in painting, and so I'm teaching you layering and glazing, which is my intermediate level class, where, because layering and glazing are two of the foundational techniques that let you do anything with the hobby. Like that's really is the foundation of everything I do, everything I paint. So I'm going to teach you a specific way to do it, which can feel like I'm not letting you express your style. But in reality, I just want to teach you like the mechanical, actual physics-based stuff. And then you can go and run away and play. But I get what you're saying, because often it isn't necessarily a technique, right? They're just trying to get you to paint or draw like them. So, and I had that with my drawing school teacher, my second semester drawing class, where she would just grab the chalk out of my hand and just like do it. And it's like, that teaches me nothing, you know? So I totally get what you're saying. I think there is a line I think we have to recognize, like, you do need, it's very wise of you to learn technique before you go off and play in the daisies. And sometimes that can feel really restrictive. But if you can at least, with this hobby, the important things to learn are brush control, paint consistency, and brush loading. And then there's some specific brush strokes that help you. So after that, you can go off and do cross-hatching on everything if you want to. I know somebody who did. Yeah, it's just like they always said, you know, learn the rules so you can break them. And it's such a cliche, and yet it wouldn't keep being used if there wasn't an ounce of truth in it, right? So do learn how that, and if you want to go off, like, I'm self-taught. I spent a long time learning how paint worked and how to load my brush and what worked for me. And it took me a long time because I didn't have anybody to teach me. I feel like these days, if you're open to it, you can learn a lot of different ways to do a lot of different things in this hobby from many really wonderful top-level painters and teachers. So these days, there's more than one way to skin that rabbit, right, as far as learning. And it's not just like, if you don't want to layer, you can wet blend. If you don't want to do smooth, you can do textures. If you don't want to do, there's all that, but you still need to understand paint consistency and loading your brush and have brush control. So it's this eternal battle. Oh God, yeah, that's just like manipulative. That's terrible. Oh, you're doing it wrong. Oh, but I love your work, but you're doing it wrong. It's like, if I get to the result and you like it so much, let me do it, right? And it's also, I don't know, teachers see us for, and this is true in painting as well. Your teacher or your mentor sees you for such a small snapshot in time, unless there's somebody that you have known for a ton of time or will know for a long time going forward. And you're always going to change. So it's not like, even if that person is like, oh, they're doing it wrong, in 5 years, they might be like, oh, you're doing it right. It's like, you just got to give people time to develop sometimes. And but humans hate being patient. We really do. We're so impatient. I am an impatient person as well. All right, so let's get it's Phoenix Red. Got to get my colors out here. Where did I put I'm like, where did my Phoenix Red go? There it is. Which is actually more Phoenix Orange, but Yeah, and creative writing teachers are correct. I mean, you hate to hear it, but learn the rules to break them. And the nice thing about, okay, so the nice thing about rules, guys, is that the rules give you confidence. The rules are meant to give you a scaffold to hang your style on. And that scaffold, you can build it a lot of different ways, but you got to have the bones. So then you build your style and your creativity. You have a nice, something that's going to hold you up, right? Something that's going to make sure you don't sag in the middle. Well, okay, a lot of us sag in the middle as we get older, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and that's what the best paint clubs do. Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, like I said, I have a friend, old friend, Sue Wachowski, who won some Golden Demons back in the day when I was still competing too. Sue, I showed her how to layer, but then she started cross-hatching everything because it gave a very soft appearance that she really liked. So I didn't tell her she was doing it wrong. I said, yeah, use whatever brushstroke you want. As long as you're, employing the principles, it's going to look, you're going to get the blend, right? So, I mean, it's a hard thing because you want to give people a foundation, but you also want to make it easier for them. And, and you don't always know when you get a student, you don't always know how committed they are. Like if they really, really want to get really good, or if they are just kind of like taking the class to see if they, get something new that they didn't expect, or, there's all sorts of expectations on both sides. Let me see, what have I got? Explosion Orange, wasn't that what we were using? I believe it was. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Oh, I've got 2 bottles of Explosion Orange here. I certainly don't need that. Yes, but you do not want your creativity to sag in the middle. It's not a best practices. A saggy middle usually means people stop looking at your stuff. No one listens to the mean old painting fossils. Oh no, am I a mean old painting fossil? That's so funny. Oh dear, mean old painting fossil. I need a t-shirt that says that. Why listen to me? I'm just a mean old painting fossil. Oh, yes, that's my next con t-shirt. Or just mean old painting fossil. That needs to be a thing. I could totally just get, I do love to joke around my increasing age. Even when I was younger, I called my friends and I the old ladies of mini painting, and it's only gotten more applicable. I totally need a mean old painting fossil t-shirt. Oh, so good. All right, Lantern Yellow for the highest highlights. All right, I'm just mixing up my triad oranges here, which is not actually a triad because I'm not actually using the highlights that are attached to Phoenix Red in reality, and I'm not using the shadows or the highlights attached to Explosion Orange. So I'm essentially, again, creating my own triad. As you guys see, I do that all the time. And I mean, part of it is that I do know the pigments. I created the paint line. I have an understanding. But it's also that really you can use any red, orange, and yellow as long as they're fairly vibrant. If you're using a brightish orange, you want to make sure that your red and yellow are fairly bright. But, you could really use a lot of different things. Lantern's just really good because it's an orangey yellow, and so it makes sense that you would want to use that to highlight an orange. You need a sculpting fossil t-shirt too. And we can make it a T-Rex skull on it, right, Julie? Like, mean old painting fossil, and it has to be like a T-Rex. Because T-Rex is my spirit animal. That seriously, Kariniko, you've started something here. I may need to get Bob and Julie's shirt sizes and create the mean old painting fossil t-shirt. I bet a bunch of my friends would want some. Hey, Maharoon, thank you for the raid. I am setting up to do some orange to go with my blue. because it's Tiefling Day. Tiefling Day, and we're going through our list of small things that we needed to finish up. And one of them is getting some orange on this this scroll case here. Ah, cool, cool. Doing Warhammer stuff, huh? Yes, thank you for the raid. Yeah, we're just talking about, Kariniko mentioned, like, mean old sculpting fossils, and we're like, or mean old painting fossils, and I was like, oh, I need that t-shirt. I guess I'm not that mean, but I could aspire to be a little meaner. But we could have painting fossils and sculpting fossils that aren't mean as well. I just think it's funny. All right. I did mix a little orange into my yellow. Now, a trick, should you wish to use it. If you would like your orange to cover better, put down a coat of white first in the areas that you want it there. I did put down some white there on that scroll case that I'm going to be highlighting. But the other trick you can do is, yeah. Oh, I always joke that I'm mean, and then they realize I'm just a teddy bear that actually has their best interests at heart. So one thing you can do, and you must be extremely cautious with it because it will change the color, but you can take a little bit of your pure white, not a whole drop, maybe half a drop, and you can mix it into the orange. This is going to make your paint more opaque. It is going to make it slightly lighter, but in the grand scheme of things, this is not too light, considering all things. You generally don't want to do this necessarily to a red because it will definitely pink it out, but you can do it with oranges and yellows with impunity to get better coverage. Nice. Nice, Crows. Excellent. Yeah, progress. I got kind of stalled out by one of my, I think I mentioned this yesterday, one of my limbo models having a broken piece. So now I need to figure out if I'm going to resculpt it or just leave it broken. I don't feel like contacting them overseas to try to get them to mail me a new piece because it'll take who knows how long these days. And I'm impatient and I want to start. Remember, impatient. That, yeah, see, there. I could be good. I could contact them and wait for a new piece. But no, I'm going to try to sculpt it. Probably with great frustration. You could be a mean old bug if you want, bug. It's okay. I'll be a mean old painting fossil. You can be a mean old bug. It'll be good. We don't have to let them know that we're actually super softies. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with that orange, I think. First, onto this scroll case. I just want the accent color here. And that little bit of white I put in there, even though it was a fairly small piece of white, it's nonetheless going to get me better coverage here. It's not quite as bright, you can see, but I also haven't added like the red yet. So once I add red shadows, it will start to be a little more vibrant. I did lose my lining here just a little bit, so I'm gonna take a damp brush and pull a little bit of the paint off while it's still wet to get that shadow. Sarcasm can be good. Just try to watch the self-deprecating humor. Because usually with self-deprecation, you're just being mean to yourself. And why would you do that to yourself? There's plenty of other people in the world who will be mean to you. Always be nice to yourself. Yourself deserves niceness from you. This was definitely hard for me to learn. I used to self-deprecate all the time because I thought it was funny, but then I realized I was really kind of being mean to me. So I started being nice to me instead. telling myself I was awesome. Made me feel a lot better. All right, so we've got that orange coming in nice and bright now because I added in the shadow, that red up at the top. And now I'm going to grab my yellow, put a little highlight down here because that's where the light is falling. I'm not going to bring it up to like a big pop of yellow, but just a little bit lighter there. Then we'll get the back. So as you can see, although we've taken a lot of breaks to talk about, you know, the greater art in the greater world and stuff, but as you can see, doing these, getting all these last little details takes a while. When you've got a very detailed model like this, it will suck up time. It's all right, marble. Fair, fair, if your actions are nice. All I really ask is that you don't put yourself down. Because it's dangerous when you get in those modes of thinking. It may leak over into your actual life. Especially if you're somebody like me, where when I make a joke about something, I'm usually only half kidding. Yeah, and it can really backfire on you, Kerniko. It can help. It can keep you from believing in yourself when you need to. That's because I used to be the same way. I hated being criticized, and so I would criticize myself first. But then I realized that it was really making me feel like I couldn't try anything because I might fail at it. It like that fear leaked through, and especially with what I'm doing now with my writing and stuff, like I really needed to cultivate the belief that I could do it, that I can do it, that I'm the kind of person that will do it. So I had to shift my inner monologue. Otherwise, this would be so scary. Like in the Patreon, same thing. Like if you don't, you know, if you're always telling yourself you're a doof and, you know, you're just a hack and all that kind of thing, it's very difficult to put yourself out there. It's hard to believe in yourself. Bug King, I'm writing, actually have finished, and I'm now like editing my young adult fantasy novel based on Norwegian folklore. I've got the first book done. The second book is done, but being rewritten a bit because it's been a long time since the rough draft was written, and I've become much better since then. And there's an agent that still has my work that's considering it, but if I can't get an agent, I'm just going to independently publish the books. There are 2 in the initial series. But yeah, I'm excited. It's fun. I'm trying to pretty much get all the submissions to agents out of the way before my birthday so that I can self-publish before my birthday this year. That's kind of my goal. Yeah, I've always I was writing before I was painting, Bug King. I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. And I ended up going into art because I also loved art, and it was something that I felt I could do as a profession. And so I ended up going that way. I needed dark. 1 second. Actually, you know what? I bet I can mix it dark. Yeah, I can. So I needed a dark to kind of line something. So I actually just mixed these 2 colors. That's what I'm talking about mixing your blacks. I mixed these 2 colors and got something that was darker than both. Because when you mix something, often it will shift that way. And then I can use this mixed with my little rich leather here to kind of bring up. I needed essentially, there's a cork on top of this bottle, this orange bottle I needed to bring out. I already did a copy content edit, Grey Wolf. And I just got recommendations for proofreader. I know. I've been reading books about how to do this right for about a year now. Ever since I committed to indie publish. My writing is pretty clean, but my editor did tell me that a lot of authors, after they get a content or copy edit, they will not do a proofread because they don't feel that it's worth the money. I'll have to look at pricing to see if I think that it is. But yeah, I agree. A lot of indie published books that you can tell they haven't paid for it. Yeah, my writing is a different world. I have three worlds. Dogs, and then writing, and then my art. So it's funny because I have friends in all different worlds that don't cross over into the other worlds. And then I've got like just a couple of friends who are in all three of my worlds. And it's so weird when a friend crosses over into another part of my world. But yeah. So I've been working very hard on my writing. Even David noticed. He's like, you've been working really hard on your writing for the last several months. And I'm like, yes, I have. It's been a long time goal and I ain't getting any younger. So time to hit that goal now. Yes, all three worlds. But yeah, people have been asking me to write a painting book, Bug, for many, many years. Many, like over 2 decades. And when I was at Reaper, I just didn't have the time. And now, like, I actually think I have it like as a kind of a Patreon goal, where if my Patreon gets to a certain level of income, that I will be able to then take the time to do a painting book. But it takes so long. Like I did painting guides for Reaper back in the day. For the Warlord book, I did like a 21-page painting guide. And because you have to there has to be photography of the miniatures, you have to do step-by-steps, which is the biggest pain in the butt if you've ever done it. You know this because you have to, you're in the groove, but you have to interrupt your groove to step out and do pictures. And so it makes the whole painting process take longer, and it makes it less enjoyable. And sometimes you don't get back into your groove and you have to wait and groove later on the next step. But because of those work in progress photos, it takes so long because you need the photography along with the text. And when you're writing a 180-page painting book, that's a lot of time commitment. And I wouldn't just reuse my Patreon stuff because I kind of feel like that's kind of a crock. Like, I would be disappointed as a patron if one of my artists put out a book and it was really just repeats of all the lessons that they just ripped out of their stuff. I know that people do that all the time. Like, they'll take their blog posts and turn it into a book if the blog is popular. But I always feel like kind of a little cheated there. So I personally wouldn't do that. I would write the book fresh with the newest examples that I could do. The other thing is that I'm always getting better, or I'm getting a new perspective on various techniques. So if I write everything fresh, then I'm essentially taking advantage of my current state of knowledge, which is more advanced than my state of knowledge, maybe 3 years ago. So right, exactly. 3 pages is easy. It's a content edit, Pendrake. So content edit actually is a critique of your story arc, your character development, the flow of your story, where things are muddy, where they need clarification. She was also editing for genre, so she was editing for specific things that are important to younger readers, like knowing the exact age of the main character. That's important when you're 15 or 16 or 17. It's very important what age you are. So it's things like that. This was not a copy edit, so it was not just a shortening or changing word choice or noticing where you were overusing word things. It was definitely a, although she did do some sentence cleanup, but yeah. Yeah, that's kind of it. So I always figured that I would need to be making quite a bit on the Patreon to kind of help pay for all of that time. And we would probably have to kickstart it, and I'd probably have to hit up Ed for help on that. So it is still like sitting here being like a thing, a potential thing. It has not gone away, and doing a painting book at some point. But this is not the time. So, and if I did do it, honestly, at this point I have my writing schedule really mapped out. Like I'm experimenting with trying a writing schedule where I actually map out like kind of the whole year, at least I go 2 quarters at a time. But I could see like giving a quarter or a third of my year over to doing a painting book if it made sense. So since I have made that time for my writing, and painting book would still be writing, just also with painting, I could maybe at least get writing done on it and then work on examples slowly. So yeah, it's still a thing. I mean, whenever people ask about it, I kind of start thinking about, well, how can I make this work? All right, so I'm just touching up the yellow, bringing it up a bit more, making it brighter. Yeah, Ify, we were just talking about. Yeah, I mean, I do write long, so my PDFs do tend to go pretty long. I would definitely do one section on pentads, not in as much detail. And that's kind of the beauty of a book synergizing with the Patreon, right? You pick up the book, you get like a good overview of pretty much everything that you can just take and run with. Then if you do want more on pentads, you can always subscribe to the Patreon for a couple months, grab the pentad PDFs and read through them, right? So it does synergize with the Patreon, and I like that. I like things that have a synergy, that kind of like build my painter like ecosystem. I guess you'd call it a painter ecosystem or a creator ecosystem. Yeah, if it never goes away, the question has always been finding the time. But as I just brought up to people, I actually have, because I'm very committed to my writing right now, my fiction writing, I actually have mapped out a year in advance, this 2022 in advance for my writing. Like I know what projects I'm going to be working on and when I'm going to be working on them and stuff like that. So if that works for me, I am doing a nonfiction book this year. I'm going to do one on Shiloh Shepherds. So my dog world is going to cross into my writing world. Been talking with one of our photographer people who are in the breed, and we're gonna do it together. So if that works, if it all works, and I'm able to work on my fiction, but I'm also able to finish this nonfiction book, that opens the door for me to assign time to write a painting book, because it means that I can balance it and work it in. So yeah, I bet those quilting books take a while. Yeah, and it's the same thing, right? You've got to document the steps, and you've got to make sure you've got good photography, and that the photos really show what you're trying to teach, right? That's the challenge of nonfiction, is like conveying the ideas in a way that people can get, you know. That's always the challenge. Yeah, it's always acrylics screen. Yeah, I lately, actually, they're right down at my little feet. I actually did whip out my oils. I have the Artisan, the water soluble, because I never ever want to smell turpentine again, or mineral spirits. But we have a local painter here who uses all oils, and he came to our paint club a couple weeks ago, like David and I host, and I got to see his work in oils, and it like kind of proved to me that maybe before I was looking at Wapple's work, and Wapple's a genius with oils. He's very, very like inspired and painterly, but that's not like my style. I'm much more tightly controlled. So seeing AJ's stuff, he's got more like control. And I'm like, oh, so you can do that with oils on miniatures. So now I'm kind of excited. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I do need to try oils on miniatures. So that's kind of sitting also in the back of my head. There's a time for everything, right? Like there are so many projects, I bet, that people are like, oh, I'll get to it. And as they think of it, even over the course of years, they just kind of build it in their head. They kind of figure out like a way to make it happen, right? And sometimes it's not the right time to do a thing until it is time to do the thing. So like for my painting book, I always thought, yeah, someday I'm going to do this. I wouldn't have put it as a potential goal for my Patreon if it wasn't a thing. But I had to find the time, and I had to find a way to make that time work. Like I had to have some sort of structure that proved to me that I could make the time and execute. And so that's what my writing schedule hopefully is. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the IP was awesome. I don't know, Max. Like, that's something I'd have to probably talk to my patrons about, because they're like you guys, a lot of you are on my Patreon, but you are my sounding board on a lot of this. So if we started kind of knocking ideas around about the book, it would very much be do you want lessons? Or do you want like more of a traditional painting book where everything is presented? And then maybe at the end, you get, okay, if you want to try this, try this. And I think maybe rather than having a step-by-step lesson guide, I kind of feel, I don't know, it's much harder. Okay, it's much harder to write a step-by-step lesson guide. And it also covers less, because you have to go so in depth on every step of the process to make sure that your people can follow along. It takes up a lot more room. Now, some people would say it would be more educational, but it also limits your audience, because are you writing to a beginner? Are you writing to an intermediate painter? Who are you writing for? So there's a lot to think about there. There's a lot to unpack. Oh yeah, and this is Freehand Acrylics, yeah. I think it's easier on a bust. I don't think I would ever do a Wapple and work on like a 54 millimeter or 28 millimeter in oils. I feel like it would be frustrating to me to do that. And I feel like 28 mil doesn't need like what oils can do. Like oils have this beautiful translucency and vibrancy. And I feel like on 28s, that's a little bit wasted. Because on 28s, remember, we're doing artificial stuff. We're punching the highlights up extra. We're plunging the shadows deeper to make all of our tiny details stand out. On a bigger model, like a bust, then you're able, or a 75 millimeter, you're able to take full advantage of all of the color stuff and that you can do with oils, right? Whereas with little guys, I feel like the precision is more important, and acrylics are better at that, in my opinion. It would almost have to be two different books then, I think, because I do want like one that talks about more advanced topics. And I feel like if you do a very basic one, like do a cloak, do a thing, do a whatever, you're going to have to teach that from a basics to intermediate standpoint, which would appeal to the greatest audience, but then you'd lose everybody else who just wants to see the magic. Like there's this like choice you make, I think, when you do a painting book is do you want to see the magic? Or do you want to learn to do things that are practical? And I don't know how successful you would be if you tried to do both in a book. I feel like you would want to do two separate books then. This is the magic. Let's go crazy. And then, let me go beast mode and show you what I can do and inspire you. Or here's the step-by-steps if you're a struggling painter who doesn't have anybody close to them or who wants to paint better and thinks that maybe you learn better by reading and doing. So I feel like that's a choice. I feel like that's a definite choice. And I feel like if you try to blend the two, you lose half of each audience. Oh, good. You got some good brushes. Great, Wiley. Awesome. Yeah, David just ordered a bunch of Da Vinci's. So I don't know that there is a total brush shortage because or a sable shortage because we're still able to order brushes. So that's good. All right, so we've got our orange there. We've got our orange there. I need to go back to my list. I'm not going to have time to do NMM today. I can touch up the... I did the scroll case. I've got my list here. My list of stuff. Very messy. Dagger and Scabbard and Hilt is done. I need to... A lot of what I have to do left is gold, but I can touch up the highlights on the cape in our last minutes here. And I could also like just let's get the eyeballs in. Where's my walnut? So I don't try to do colored irises ever on 28s. I feel like it looks artificial. You have to really usually make the eye look bigger than it is. Like you have to artificially enlarge the eyes to get the iris in there. So I just don't do it. I always go dark. I usually go walnut because it covers so well and I can thin it down to the point where I can get a tiny little dot and it will still cover. So that's walnut brown 9136. Yeah, I don't know about that, Pendrake, about the chapter like lesson thing because every armored leg is different. Like especially if you're talking NMM, like you would need to do NMM, you would need like an entire section just on theory, followed by practical examples. But every leg is different, depending on the armor, the shape of the armor. I don't know. It would be a very difficult thing to do a lesson book like that. You'd almost have to like just choose a particular model and do it, but then you're also limiting your audience. Like, so you really have to think about it. I mean, what I really think, Pendrake, is that the place for what you're describing is my Patreon and not a book. I kind of feel that way. Like, because it's so much easier for me to do that. Like, I could do that for the Patreon. Okay, guys, let's paint an armored leg today. Like, in fact, that's a great idea, and I should absolutely execute on that. But I think for a book, if you're going to pay, 20 or 25 or 30 bucks or more, some of these painting books are insanely, like Kurils. Kurils is freaking exhaustive, but it's really good if you're at a higher level. I do not have a gemstone video on my YouTube yet. I'm really starting up from kind of scratch doing these fundamentals videos. Did I do a gemstone video for the Patreon yet? I don't know if I even did one for the Patreon, and I should. Although, you know what? You know what you can do? Seriously, look up here. Quindy can find it for us. Quindy, I need you to find Painting the Crystals on Rock Troll. So on Reaper's YouTube, find the one where we're doing like some of these big crystals. Not the little guys. The little guys weren't... the little guys I kind of pulled on earlier. But if you want crystals... Now, gemstones are different, but just a little bit. It's a very complicated topic, the gemstone and crystal topic. But if you want crystals, we definitely have done that on this show. I don't know that we've done a gemstone, like a round gemstone, because so few models have them sculpted at any size. Yeah, I don't know what would have the greatest appeal. And that's why I kind of have to ask my Patreon, because although I also have to keep in mind that a lot of my patrons are at that, beginner intermediate level. So they're probably going to reach for what they feel is like most functional for them. Although that probably also would have the broadest appeal. I feel like these days, like books that do tackle like the fundamentals, like most of the mini painting books I know out there are actually advanced. Like Kurils' book. Kurils' book's brilliant if you're at the level where you can execute on all of that. And if you're not at that level, there really isn't a good book. There's lots of YouTube. There's lots of, there's lots of other media that will help you tackle those things. And part of that is that painting does tend to lend itself to you actually watching someone paint, right? But yeah, so I feel like most books out there actually don't appeal to the beginner intermediate painter. I don't think I've seen the Treasure Golem. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we would totally do that. And that would be kind of the hard thing for me. What I would probably do, Pendrake, is actually choose like 3 or 4 models of very different types where I could demonstrate pretty much the whole gamut of things and finish them by the end. Even if I don't tackle every single thing on them. So now that we've got that, and I've got the eye, okay, I've got my walnut. Is this strong enough? I feel like I need a little bit more. I thinned my walnut a little bit too much for pupils. Yeah, Angel and Banshee and Kirill. I mean, all of those guys are doing books, and those books, those are the look at the magic book. Those are the show me the magic books. Kirill's book is wonderful to look through, even if you have no idea or interest in mini painting, because his stuff is so good. And so even David's parents looked through that book with us when they were here. And really enjoyed it, like actually engaged with it because the magic is so magical. So it's like, again, it's between the show me the magic or the, and I think that for many advanced painters, the show me the magic route is more attractive. We all love to show what we can do. And especially on our Patreons or our YouTubes, we don't always get to go and show you that. We usually don't get to go that way. We don't get to go beast mode, like, because that intimidates people. Like, if we go to the top of what we can do, there will be some people who engage with the show me the magic, but a lot of people will feel like, oh, I could never do that, right? And that's not what we want. At least not if you're like me and you really want to instruct and inspire people in the hobby. So it really is a tough choice. It's a really tough choice. So it's something you want to think about. All right, so come up from the bottom. Paint on the exhale, so you relax. Yeah, there we go. That's a little better. Got the placement. I lost a little of my white, so I might have to go and touch that up. My hands are just a little bit shaky today. I didn't even have extra caffeine. But there, we've got a pupil. Okay, I need to get the eyeball on the other side. And this one's hard because the arm is here, so we're going to have to come up from this angle probably to hit that. Hello, Balfour. Balfour del Fuego. I painted it exactly as it's sculpted. Because you should technically have connecting muscle up here, right? But that's how it's sculpted. So that's how it's painted. If I were painting it for a competition, Balfour, I would have resculpted that part probably. But this is just for the show. So these are definitely more informal models. Little bit of a pupil there. Is he looking the same direction? Yes, he is. Okay, good. You always want to look. Oh, it's okay. I mean, it's good to point that out. I mean, sometimes, no matter how good the sculptor, and Bobby Jackson is kind of a pro, but sometimes, like, the anatomy on miniatures doesn't quite line up. Now, I could, now that you've pointed that out, here, I have a little bit of my Phoenix Red. I could maybe minimize that by taking this, up a little bit. But I'd probably have to put a fair amount of time into suggesting a line that's not really there. But yeah, that's another argument for like learn anatomy, right? Because there are plenty of models, you've probably run into them too, right? Where the sculpt is just a little bit not quite right. And on the anatomy, and you have to paint plastic surgery it a little bit or do some sculpt. It's totally a thing. Yeah, we could just say that the Hellborn have slightly different anatomy, right? Yes, have a good lunch, Shadow Raven. Thanks for coming. Oh, good. Yes. Aaron Hartwell did a crystals class. Thank you, Quindy. So seriously, definitely look into that. Aaron is a great painter, and she does fantastic work. And so definitely look into that crystals class. Thank you, Quindy. I didn't even think about that. I should have thought about Reaper virtual classes from Virtual ReaperCon. Quindy is the best. Awesome. All right, so we will... Next time it's going to be gold. We have to get the edging on the freehand flame. We have to hit the edges of the cloak. We have to decide, we have to fix these runes and get them actually on there. And we have to decide if we're going to do a gold border on the teal as well. My fiance said that he felt it needed it. My concern is that it's going to run right into this lantern. But I might be, there's a deep shadow here, so I might be able to just kind of get it by. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure if I want it, though. I'm still not sure. It does fit the model, but I'm not sure. Yeah. No Reaper Live tonight. What? Who's slackers? Slacking? Ed and Dave? So I can cross eyes off my list. So yeah, we have to do... Those are the things that are left, guys. So we have maybe... Oh, and the silver chain. We didn't do the silver chain. So we'll do the silver chain next time. For the most part... I mean, we did the staff pretty much, Bull. It's just bone, so there really aren't any gems or anything on it. I think it shows up well, but I don't want it to be brighter because if I make it any brighter, it's going to seriously draw the eye. So right now I feel like if I back up on this model, it balances pretty well. All things considered. It is such a busy model. It is so hard. Snow in Texas. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remember Reaper Snow Days. Those were fun. Those were super fun. Well, then I hope everybody stays safe down in Texas. Now that I'm no longer in a climate where I see snow ever. You'll never be free of free. Oh dear. But yes, I remember the ice apocalypse too down there. Oh, yeah. Ice storm. Ooh, yeah. Ice is bad in Texas. I mean, all the years I lived there, I remember a couple of ice apocalypses. And it was just, other than having off work unexpectedly, it was negative fun. All right. So Crafty Creative with Josh, 2 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for coming tomorrow. Come back for... Dun, dun, dun. More work on our bust. Yay! She's starting to look pretty good. I'm getting happier with the skin tones. She needs more highlights though. So yes. Yes, we are getting there, everybody, on the bust. So that'll be tomorrow. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. We're almost to the weekend. Hang in there. Bye everybody.